You're listening to ILA Radio. I'm your host, Laura Alyn, and joining us is Alexandra Beller. How are you, Alexandra?
I'm good today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I spent a long time as a professional dancer, and then started choreographing and ran a dance company for about 16 years. During that time, I got an MFA and something called a CMA, Certified Movement Analyst. So that teaches you how to analyze the human body for meaning, how to analyze the movement of the human body for meaning. And you can look at that through dance or athletics, but you can also look at it through psychology and relationships. Some of it went into different threads that, like, the CIA uses, like nonverbal communication. So that choreography took me into theater. Theater took me into more therapeutic movement practices. So I started seeing clients one on one for something akin to dance movement therapy and mentoring people on their own artistic practices. I had two kids along the way, got married and divorced, and then met my love. And now I'm just about to send two different manuscripts to two publishers. Uh, Still choreographing for theater, seeing lots of private clients, raising my two kids, and teaching.
Wow, that's incredible. You were able to bring your whole life into like a nutshell, and I think there's so many different threads that I want to pick at. So we'll start off with looking at the moon sign. So the moon sign represents like the inner world, like the your emotions, but a lot of people also say that it represents the body. And you have it in Taurus, which is an earth sign, in the fifth house, which is about expression. So it's that you're able to express yourself through your body. And so could you walk us through like how did this start? Were you always a dancer? Like how did it begin when you were little?
Yeah, I do feel like dance was never felt like a hobby or, an extracurricular activity. It was like always really from a very cellular, soulful place. I took some dance classes when I was little, but it wasn't a focused practice. But the first real like dance class I took when I think I was about 8, I was like, okay, that's it. And grown-ups would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'd say, I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I'd say, oh, I'm already doing it. I'm a dancer. And so even though I didn't have a traditional dancer's body and lots of teachers were discouraging, in terms of like my potential to have a career in dance, it just never seemed like it was an option for me to choose something else. And I figured, if it feels like an option at some point, I'll choose it. But right now, this just is what I have to do. And then I did it.
Wow, that's incredible because I have a similar background as far as dancing. Like, I loved dancing when I was little, and I was discouraged as well. And so I stopped doing it. And only recently have I started back into it. And so now I'm a hula dancer, and just being on stage is the absolute best thing. Like, you couldn't wipe the smile off my face if you paid me. Like, I just loved it so much. And so I was just so excited to talk to you. Um, Talking about was it the CRM, or the
CMA,
CMR? CMA.
Certified Movement Analyst. Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at the movement of the dance as far as meaning, because in hula, every dance move has a meaning and is connected to a story. So, do you see that across the board or throughout all dances?
Not at all. Not in terms of literal meaning. I mean, I absolutely feel like there is always meaning in every single movement that our body makes. Whether it's functional movement, we're trying to get more comfortable, or there's some expression to the way we're holding our shoulders or our postures, our gestures. There is absolutely meaning to every single movement we do. The sects of dance that have literal meaning, to some degree, Bharatanatyam, some parts of classical Chinese dance. hula for sure, certain Filipino dances, right? Like there are a lot of dances where there is storytelling involved. And to some degree, ballet has some of that as well. Like there are gestures that are kind of recognized as mime in ballet. So that's like literal meaning, storytelling. I, I want everybody in the audience who understands this language to hear the same story. The type of dance I do is more metaphorical, inner narrative. So it's my body being very expressive. I think it does mean something, but I would not want everyone in the audience to say, "Oh, I think somebody died and you're sad." Like I don't want everyone to have the same story. I want everyone to get a sense in their body that something important is happening, and I want it to make them feel something, and they can make up a story out of what they feel or what they imagine. But I don't do dances that have literal meaning, and there are plenty that do and plenty that don't.
So, could you get more into what led you to get the CMA?
I mean, I do feel like I've had an interesting journey in my life where I feel like, and I don't necessarily subscribe to the like everything happens for a reason type of thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that philosophy, but it's just not been mine. I think there's a lot of randomness to the universe, and but I do feel like the paths have always felt like they just really opened out for me. That doesn't mean any of them were easy. But for example, I graduated college. I had this non traditional dancer's body. At that time, which was 1990, there were no larger female dancers in professional dance companies. Now there's a little more diversity, but back then there was none. So it didn't really make sense for me to think that I was going to get a job in a big company. Um, but all of these people kept asking me if I was going to this Bill T. Jones audition, which is one of the biggest dance companies in the States. Um, and like no one had ever asked me if I was going to an audition before. And my friend from Michigan called me up and she was like, I just saw Bill T. Jones perform. You should be in that company. And I was like, that's so sweet, but I'm not getting into that company. Like we all know that, right? And then like three people the week before the audition asked me if I was going. And finally I was like, I'm going. Okay, I'm going. And I just went just to have some fun, like, okay, something's pushing me there. I'll go there. And then I got the job of my life, and it, definitely changed the whole course of my life. I feel like with the CMA, which is the degree in Laban Bartenieff, the same thing happened. It's sort of like the things just like lined up in front of me. It didn't really make sense for me to go back to school, but my babysitter came home and she was like, I'm going to need to change my schedule a little because I'm going to get this degree. And it was like 7 blocks from my house. It's like an international institution. Like there's only one of them. And it was like 7 blocks from my house. And she was going, and I was like, what is that work again? And she told me. And this happens to me often where I say the thing before I feel like I've actually made a conscious decision. I say what the decision is, and then I hear myself say it, and I'm like, oh, I guess that's what I'm doing. And I said, yeah, I was thinking I might do that too. And she was like, really? And I was like, I don't know, really? I just said that. And then, like, a week later, I had an application in, and, it's history from there. So I do feel like even though I've had a very windy career, that things have linked very organically. And this one did too. And as soon as it did, it pulled me into these two worlds, theater and trauma therapy, which I didn't cast ahead. I didn't decide that's what I wanted to do. And I guess that's this winding story that I'm trying to say is that I I'm not someone who makes like a 3 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. I don't like think of a goal and then I'm going to get it. I'm kind of just follow the twists and turns that come to me. And the reason I say I don't really practice that everything happens for a reason is that it feels a little topographic, like some divine force is putting things in your path for you to pick up. And that one for me doesn't resonate, though I know it does for many, and that's great. But I do feel like instinctually or intuitively, I just sort of turned my body in different directions and then like, oh, there's a path there. I'll just keep walking. And it's just been a very fluid, though hard won pathway.
It's interesting that you bring up intuitively because that was going to be my next question. Well, my question was going to be, do you think that it was your intuition? And if so, like, how would you define intuition?
Oh, I love talking about intuition. So I
Right.
have I have this theory. So I feel like, especially we're sitting in America, or I am. Are you sitting in America as well?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm in Los
So
Angeles.
okay, so we're sitting in America. Obviously, certain kind of education system, certain level of capitalism, productivity or oriented, go go go. I feel like we raise our children with a bias towards outer metrics rather than inner metrics. So, what's the weight? What's the decibel? What's the watts, whatever, like all these different metrics, even for your body, right? People have metrics for your body, and even, doctors will believe their metrics rather than your felt experience. Then there are all these inner metrics, your heart beat, your pulse, you have cerebral spinal fluid, which is what bathes your spinal cord. It has a pulse. Your skin temperature, your gut feeling, the way your breath feels, how your bones are expanding, like all of these inner metrics. And we don't really educate children to hear them, and then we don't create space where we're honoring them from the outside. So I feel like we're raised kind of missing a sense. And the sense is interoception, like feeling the inside of the body, what's happening in my body. And then socially, we're not raised to value those inner metrics. So we're not raised to see them. And then if we do see them, we're not raised to value them, or other people don't value them in relation to us. So I feel like intuition, and wherever that might go, psychic, whatever, you can fantasize about the science fiction of the future of, our evolution, telekinesis, or, whatever. I'm not saying we're going to any of those places, but I do think that we have an actual sixth sense that got stilted and did
Mhm.
not get, um, we're, look at that, look at that, look at that. Okay, my vision is online. Listen to that. Okay, my hearing is online. But we don't get raised to value the inner metrics. And I think our intuition actually is our sixth sense, but we don't really have access to it in any profound way, the way we do, if we're privileged enough to have the other five senses active. Intuition is not at that level for most people. But I think as a species, it could be if if the nurture was different.
Yeah, definitely. I think we just need to learn how to tap in. So, do you have any tips on how to develop intuition?
Well, interestingly, I mean, it sounds contradictory to what I just said about the five senses and intuition is the sixth. I think that those five senses can help you get into the sixth. So I think that um, turning those senses inward and almost using vision, obviously, I'm not turning my eyeballs in and I cannot see the inside of my body in an optical way, but I can envision it. I can imagine bones. I can imagine my intestines. Like, if you study a little bit of anatomy, you can start to see the inside of your body. And that helps you start to sense, like, oh, that rib feels a little achy, or, oh, wow, my heart is racing a lot. And then noticing, like, okay, if I change my breath, what does that do to my heart rate? So all of the ways that we turn out into the world, and in somatic therapy, often when people are activated, we'll say to calm yourself and ground yourself, name five things that you see, four things that you hear, three things that you smell, etc. Like, use your senses to get back into your body. So the senses can go out into the world, but the senses can also tune into the body. So I do think that closing your eyes, doing some form of meditation, but for me, the meditation is a sense meditation. I'm trying to hear things that my body is saying to me. And so, that thing where you're trying to get comfortable in bed or in a hammock or a chair, and you're like, you like adjust. Oh, that's not quite right. And you adjust again. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there it is. That's the one. That's the position. You're hearing your body. Your body says, oh, right there, right there, right there. And we want to listen for that kind of thing, not just when we're trying to find the right position in bed, but in all kinds of situations. So, like intuitive eating is going to teach you like to really listen to the hunger and follow it, to listen to the satiety and follow it, and to listen to the cravings and let them, whether you fulfill them or not. Like, yeah, I'm craving sugar. That could mean a lot of things. And maybe it means I want to have a popsicle, but maybe it also means I need a certain kind of micronutrient. So, but I'm listening to it. I'm not ignoring it, right? And we can be very abusive with how much we ignore the sensations of the body. So, my interest and my advice for people who want to increase their intuition is to do more listening to the body, and not just listening to it, but um, fulfilling it. So I sometimes imagine my body as like my toddler that I brought to the grocery store who's having a tantrum in the cereal aisle. And that's because I've not necessarily included his needs in our choices for the day. My body is that toddler. And if I just drag it around, work, 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 and go, 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 and da da da, and then, work out and get fit and don't eat that, but my body is going to rebel against me in various ways: pain, illness, disease, shutdown, numbness, dissociation, weight, more or less, whatever, sleep more or less, whatever. But it's not going to collaborate with me. And because I'm not collaborating with it, it has needs. Our emotions are completely embedded in our tissue and our bone and our organ, and trauma is embedded there. And those parts of the body ask for things, and we continually say, shh, shh, not now, not now, not now. I have stuff to do. No, I don't have time for that. No, that's not important. And if that were your toddler, eventually they would have a meltdown, which is the illness or the stepping off the sidewalk and breaking your ankle, or and I'm not saying that every disease or illness or injury is because we're not listening to the body. I do think there's some randomness to life. And I notice when I'm not taking care of myself, when I'm not listening to my body, eventually my body will be like, okay, I'll give you the flu. If that's the only way that I'm going to get you to listen to me, I'll make you sick. I'll throw your back out. Have fun.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with everything that you just said. And I think it's so interesting because you have Capricorn in the first house, and it's also where you have Jupiter and the North Node. So, Jupiter is the way that you expand. So, talking about that sixth sense, expanding your senses is by starting with the five. And the North Node is where you're like headed in a way in this life. And so it's like getting in connection with your body. And so you do that through dance. And then now you're talking about it in an intuitive sense. Are there other ways that you connect with your body?
I feel like it's a very profound ongoing conversation, and movement for me is one of the biggest ways that I can have that conversation. And so there's something called authentic movement, where if you're in a safe space and you feel safe emotionally, close your eyes, and you just let your body do exactly what it wants. And you're not thinking about, like, is it pretty? Would somebody think it's artistic? Uh, Nothing like that. You're not judging at all. You're not thinking. You're just letting your body do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And often, some of our unconscious wants, needs, fears, feelings come out through the body, and you'll notice yourself like doing a gesture, and then you open your eyes and you're like, what is that gesture about? Oh, I'm like, looks like I'm grabbing at this rope. And what is that feeling? And you just let it expand and become something. And sometimes your unconscious can start to bleed into your conscious, and you'll have an image and you'll be like, yeah, I feel like there's this rope and it goes so high up, I can't even see. And I don't know if it's tethered to something. And I'm really scared to climb it, but I kind of feel like I have to. So, and what could that be in my life? Oh, it's this new path I'm taking, or I'm thinking of leaving my marriage, or like I feel like I'm trying to raise myself out of the muck into the unknown, and I don't know if there's going to be stability there, and I'm terrified, but I'm also excited and hopeful. And so, these things start to become clear to you through the body in ways that, for me, I don't think they come out quite that way through just talk therapy, like a more traditional therapeutic practice. For me, great things come out, great ideas, but a lot of it's thinking, and a lot of it's conscious. And I do think that there's a lot more material in the body, so that more somatic forms of therapy, for me, I think, are more generative.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about next. Could you talk about your one-on-one therapy sessions? Like, how did that come about, and what kind of stuff do you do in there?
Yeah. Well, as part of the CMA, I studied something called Bartenia Fundamentals. I describe it as the user manual for the human body. So the human body is like an appliance that you've had in your house your whole life, and it works. It works fine. You know what it does. There's like a bunch of buttons on it that you never figured out, but you don't feel like you necessarily need them or anything. That's fine. And one day you discover the user manual, and you're like, let me go through this, and you're like, oh, holy, there's a timer. Oh my God, that would make life so much easier. Oh, there's an auto whatever. Oh, that would be amazing. And so Bartenieff is like that for the body. You're like, oh, this joint actually doesn't want to do that. You actually want to stabilize here to mobilize there. I've been using my lower back to do that my whole life. So Bartenieff helps get you into this biomechanical efficiency. Of course, what the body does, the life does, the spirit does. So when I get more aligned and grounded and free and easy, and understand when to work and when to surrender, that's all going to translate into my life. So I started seeing people one on one for Bartinia fundamentals, essentially, like, I'll help you become a more efficient mover. But very quickly, my neurodivergent brain, which like does more diverse pattern recognition, sometimes I'd hear myself say something about the body, like, you can't hold on to something and let go of it at the same time. I'd be talking about a joint, and I'd be like, oh, that's kind of deep, and I just kept saying these things one after another all session long. And, the client would be crying. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I need to do in my life. And I'm like, I was just trying to talk about your hip socket. But yeah, we are talking about your life. And it became clear to me that it's never just your hip socket. So those sessions started to become more and more therapeutic. And the more of them I did, the more I learned in practice. And I've started, I'm also a masseuse. So I was doing, for a period of time, hospice massage. I was massaging people as they transitioned out of their life. And then I often was doing grief massage with their loved ones that they left behind. So I had a lot of interaction with immediate trauma, and that started to inform the work. Eventually, that didn't feel like a sustainable practice for me in my life, because I don't love making strong boundaries. I like surrounding myself with people that I don't need to have really strong boundaries with, because I don't enjoy the energy of holding a boundary that much. And working with dying and grieving people, I really needed to hold such a strong boundary for myself, or I would feel just overwhelmed with grief myself. So I learned a lot from that, and I hopefully gave some to those humans, but I couldn't continue that practice. But it informed a lot of what I do with clients. And so now I do something, I can't call it dance movement therapy because that's got its own license, but I mean, it's essentially a similar thing. It's a therapeutic practice through movement. It looks 1,000 different ways with different clients. Some people, we end up like dancing and dancing, and some people, they end up playing in fetal curl with my hands on them, and some people, we're talking for 90% of the time. So, and different people, different sessions, it changes. But I'm trying to let the information of their body have access to the world, either through their movement or through their voice. And then I try to be a sounding board and reflect back things I hear, and frame or reframe things and ask them questions. And it's a beautiful practice that I'm honored to be able to do with folks.
That's so incredible because in the one-on-one section of the chart, you have it in Gemini. And so Gemini is that like wanting a little of everything to come together. But that's also where you have Saturn. So it's interesting that you brought up boundaries because Saturn is the planet of boundaries. And so I love that you found spaces where you don't need to hold strong boundaries so that you're allowed or you allow yourself to be able to tap into all these different ways. Gemini is also the sign of talking and expression communication, and I saw that you have a book out, so could you talk about your book?
Yeah, it's not out yet. It's coming out next May. It's called The Anatomy of Art: Unlocking the Creative Process for Theater and Dance, and it's essentially a mentorship experience for artists. So if you've heard about or done The Artist's Way, it's a similar experience, except that The Artist's Way was really for everybody, which is wonderful. This is more for people who already have an artistic practice, but feel stuck and want help, or are tired of themselves and want to get out of their habits, or want it to be easier or more fun or more prolific. So I identified what I think of as 12 aspects of the creative process that feel important. They're certainly not the only 12. You could pick 12 totally other ones, but time, space, meaning, environment, relationship, process, facts, faith, communication, material, context and culture, and priorities. Those are the 12 topics. And so in each chapter, there's an essay and an embodiment exercise and a creative exercise and a score and a writing set of writing prompts, and then about 50 questions about that topic, about your art. So if I were mentoring you as an artist and you said, I'm making a dance or I'm directing a play and I need your advice, we come into rehearsal. Most of what I would do is ask you questions. So I've tried to put every question I might possibly ask any artist in one of those chapters so that at some point they'll be like, and what I try to do when I get in the room is ask the question where the artist goes, oh, yeah, that's it. That's the question. Okay. I don't want to give them an answer. I want to give them the question that helps them get moving again, right? So when we're asked a question, our creativity starts again. We're trying to find an answer to the question. Our body, our brain, spirit, whatever you want to say, intuitively starts looking around for an answer. And so when I ask a question to an artist, what I want to do is find the question that gets them really moving and moving, hopefully in the direction they wanted to head, maybe didn't know they wanted to head, etc. So it started off just as a book of questions, and then it just grew and grew and grew and grew until now it's this like very large, expansive creative process recovery system.
So you have Mercury in Sagittarius, and so this kind of goes along with what you were saying when you first started the CMA, where it like Mercury is the sign of communication, so it's like you say it and it kind of directs you to where it needs to go. Because Sagittarius is like an arrow, so it's like a straight shooter. But then here's where you also have Neptune, and Neptune is very optimistic, but it also likes getting kind of like into like the dream world to able to kickstart imagination. And so again, it's trying to so it's conjunct your Mercury, so it gets activated through this language, through these questions. And this is all in the 12th house. And the 12th house is the place where I could call it imagination, but it's also like activating like the subconscious. And so, would you say that you you feel or how what's your relationship like with your subconscious or like how do
Oh,
you activate it or
yeah, it's very barely sub anymore. Like, it's a very thin veil between my conscious and subconscious and unconscious minds. So, I have a lot of communication with different parts of myself that want to share different pieces of information to me. A lot of that, as I said before, does come through my body. So, like, I'll notice myself make a gesture and I'm like, oh, hi, what's going on? And I'm like, I can be me, adult, 52 years old, you know, couple degrees, lots of intellectual, grounding. But this hand that I'm looking at, that's not me as 52. That's some other part. And I can talk to it and be like, what's going on? And I can feel like, oh, that's a little one. Like that's some littler part of me that wants something. And so then I can start to have a conversation with it. And for me, the veil is quite thin, and I feel like I've started in menopause actually to be able to more intentionally like shed the veil and just go in. Like if I create a safe space and am in the right head and body space, I can go pretty on a pretty deep journey inside and have quite a bit of communication in a sort of like I think what people get on psychedelics. I'm starting to have more and more ability to like move in that direction without medicine.
Yeah, I've always said that people do psychedelics to be able to learn how to do it naturally. And so like once you do it now, you don't have to take the drug anymore. You can just find it internally. And I also really like how throughout your entire chart you have that light aspects, like the fire signs, in spaces where they're typically dark or typically like taboo or unheard of. And so like how you were saying, like the veil is very thin. Your sun sign is right on the line of the subconscious, and the 11th house is more like community and like your dreams, hopes, aspirations. So it's right on that line to be able to like teeter between them to be able to get you to your highest self. And then Leo is in the 8th house, and similarly, 8th house is normally ruled by Scorpio, which is your sun sign. And Leo obviously is a very vibrant, light shedding sign. Down in the 4th house is Aries, and the 4th house is about family and like who you care for. And so, would you say that it's that you shine light, or maybe your light comes from caring for your family and then it's able to radiate outwards, or like what's your experience with that, with the light coming out?
I feel like I have very little light behind me from my family of origin, and I feel like I had to generate a lot of it. I mean, my kids inspire like a huge amount of love, and I've also worked quite hard to break some generational, um, patterns. So I would say my kids definitely bring out an enormous amount of love and light from me. I don't feel like that inspires other things as much as it feels like its own little bubble. And um, my like art and community and all of that stuff out in the world and my kind of intellectual pursuits, that feels very different from my relationship to my kids and my partner. But I do feel like often when I'm out in the world or with a client or teaching a class, even with you, the analogy that comes up is a parenting analogy, because a lot of my, I think, learning and healing has been through parenting, like reparenting myself as I parent my kids, parenting my kids the way I think a kid should be parented, trying to provide the love for them that I didn't necessarily experience. So I feel like I have learned probably more from being a mother than anywhere else, even though that's not the biggest part of my identity. Like, I think I have a very big identity in my like somatics and career and creativity and art, and all of that feels very big to me. Um, but at a like soulful level, I feel like my relationship with my kids has been probably the most important one I've had.
Yeah, and that's actually reflected here with your Venus in Libra, because you have it in the 10th house, which is career. And so Venus is the sign of love that is like for the world instead of for your kids or your partner. And so that's right next to Uranus. And that's the sign of revolution and changing things up. So would you say that you have been like a shaker or a trailblazer in your career? Can you talk about that,
Yeah,
please?
100%. And not like necessarily meaning to. Like it doesn't feel like I have a like kind of a bellicose mentality. I'm not trying to break things down. I think partly my personality and partly my neurodivergent brain, I'm like, well, that's not a good way for that to work. Let's do it differently. Like, that doesn't make sense. Why would I do that? It's not like, let's change the system, let's break it down. I don't have that kind of like, I'm going to, like I got into this dance company. There weren't any women that weren't thin in dance companies, but I wasn't like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to change the dance world, I'm going to be a role model. I was just like, I don't know, I got this job, I really want this job, I really like doing it, I'm just dancing. I don't, and people wanted to write articles about it and talk about it and interview me, and I was like, I don't especially want to talk about it, I just want to do what I'm doing and have you all just like get over yourselves. So I feel like I do things differently, but I don't feel like it's for the goal of changing things. It's just when things don't make them, when the status quo doesn't make sense, it doesn't seem, I don't feel compelled to stick with a system that's not working.
That makes a lot of sense. So in the second house, you have Aquarius, which is the sign of I'm going to go out there and change the world, like the whole rebel thing. But you don't have any planets in there, so it's like a blank slate. And so the second house is naturally ruled by Taurus, which we already talked about is where you have your moon sign. So it's very grounded. So would you say, or what's your relationship like with nature, like with that grounding? Is it through nature, or do you have a relationship with nature to ground, or is it more just through your body?
I think that I would if I were living in a different place. I mean, I grew up in New York City and I still live in New York City, and most of my work is in urban places. I will say that water for me is the most, I mean, ironically, grounding thing. Like, I know water's not earth, but water for me is like so healing. And just to be by a body of water for me, I always feel more myself. Um, so I love to go to water, but I don't get to very often. Um, I I'm one of those kids that like I did not grow up like playing with bugs and seeing animals, and bugs and animals were like not to be trusted in New York City. It's, like things that you don't want to see when you see a bug or an animal. So I can't say that I grew up in a like the nurture sense with a real relationship to nature or a lot of exposure to it. But absolutely, when I get in it, I immediately am like, oh, this is a bit of me, this would be good. So I do have like a retirement fantasy about being in nature, and letting that affect me and affect my body.
So talking about growing up, what were you like as a student? Were you always wanting to dance and move your body, or were you like, yeah, just what were you like as a student?
uh, I think because of trauma, I don't have an incredible memory bank from my childhood. So I sometimes have trouble answering questions about my childhood because I literally just have like little flashes. Um, but I loved reading, I loved writing, I went through all kinds of different art forms. I painted for a while, I drew for a while, I sang for a while. I played a couple instruments, and then I was like crafty, and eventually I learned to like crochet and knit. I was always like teaching myself art forms. Um, and part of my neurodivergent brain, like when I'm really interested in something, I get totally focused on it, fixated, totally commit to it, go full hearted. So in school, it was like if it was a subject that I was excited about, I was their absolute favorite student. I always had something to say. And then in like math class, I did not do great. So, I mean, I went to pretty nerdy schools and I held my own. I was not super social. I feel like I didn't get incredibly bullied. I got a little bit bullied, but I do feel like I was always just a little bit outside the action, not one of the popular kids. They didn't hate me, but I I was never like in the middle of the action. I was always a little peripheral, and then I was always going off to dance. And I found my communities in these other places, often with older people. Like the dance classes I took were mostly adult dance classes when I was a teenager because I was in New York. So I could just go take open classes with, 20-year-olds. Um, so I did find really deep connections. I feel like I always had one best friend, and we were really close, and I always had a really intimate relationship with somebody, but I didn't have like groups of friends, and I didn't stay super visible.
Hmm. Yeah, I had a very similar experience with one best friend, and it would kind of switch every year to somebody new. But oh, so you've already talked about needing intuitive development or something like it. But what's another way that you would change the education system here in America?
Oh, well, my one of the biggest things that am trying to recover adults from is like the way their head is glued to their spine, which I think also fixes our thinking. It fixes what we see, and there's just so much like curiosity and divergent thinking when we let the head free itself from the spine. So there's a somatic practice called Alexandra technique, and really its whole goal is just to free your head from your spine. So one of the biggest things I would fix about the education system is, if you look at babies and toddlers, their heads are just like constantly going everywhere in the world, and their mouths are hanging and their tongues are sticking out, and they're like just taking in the world based on their curiosity, their interest, their desire. And then right about 5 years old, we're like, sit in this seat, look front, shut your mouth. Even if they do it nicely with lots of cute, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, it's still not it's not developmentally appropriate for our species. We should be still in nature. We should be looking around. We should be learning things based on our interests. We should not be just fed a systemic curriculum that's, universal. Everyone's learning the same 12 things. Um, which is probably, basically like what Waldorf does to change education. I did not get raised in a Waldorf education and didn't have the funds to raise my kids that way. So I don't know enough about it. I have a few friends who teach in it, but I gather that that's basically what they do. They do a lot of work in nature. They really let kids, just decide what direction they go. What are they interested in? What are they curious about? Where are their questions? They let them follow their own interests. But even in like the public school education system, one thing is I would not make children sit still and stare ahead, because I think it creates trauma in the head spine, and that trauma is basically a certain kind of authoritarianism that we absorb skeletally, and we don't get rid of it, until somebody comes in and is like, I'm going to help you free your head from your spine, and it is also going to free your thinking. It's going to free your mind.
I never connected the two with like your reasoning or your intellect with being able to move and like have like that free flowing curiosity. But I used to be a public school teacher, and in kindergarten they have like such vivid imaginations, and by eighth grade it's like pulling teeth to get them to be imaginative. So do you? You already kind of said like to go around in nature and to look around, but are there any tips that we could do?
Well, I would say the biggest tip would be slowing down, because we're not meant to go this fast. We're not meant, we developed all these technologies, cars and planes and rockets and internet and, all these things where speed comes into our species. But evolutionarily, our species is not at this pace yet. And so we've created a speed to our world that actually I don't think our bodies, minds, spirits are really functional at. I think it's all too fast. And we survive it and we do a great job, and we keep up. But you hear a lot of people, "Oh, I feel like I'm on a moving train," or "I feel like I'm being dragged by a bus," or "I feel it's all going too fast." And if you've ever walked with a child and they're like stopping at the dirt and they found a caterpillar and they're, "What's that rock?" And your adult body's like, "Just come on, just like we just need to get to the grocery store," and like, "Don't be so slow." If we actually could try to slow down, and we may not be interested in that specific rock, but if we could have that same kind of like slow walk. And in New York, you're going to want to get out of the way of people, and you're going to want to maybe not do it on like a busy thoroughfare where people are going to get mad at you and be abusive. But to go for a pretty slow walk and like actually feel the way your feet roll against the ground, feel the way your weight shifts from side to side, free your head, really watch things, notice where your eyes go, wander down the bark of a tree, see what you see, notice a couple colors, slow your breath, and just like stop, like get off the treadmill and teach your nervous system what it feels like to slow down. And I think part of our crisis around consent, and I mean this on many levels, but certainly when we're teaching like teenagers about bodily consent, this is part of it. We have not taught, and I'm going to say, especially female identifying, presenting, and marginalized bodies, we haven't taught them to honor slowing down to see what they actually want and how they actually feel. And we're like, say no if you don't want something. They're like, that no didn't come up for 3 days. That no was not available because they were operating on somebody else's tempo, somebody else's pace. And so if you're operating in somebody else's pace and they're like, is this okay? And you're like, okay, yeah, I don't know. I, uh, I don't know, I guess. I can't think. I can't feel anything. This is too fast for me. And we don't teach, especially um, female identifying, presenting, and marginalized humans, we don't teach them to honor their own tempo. We're like, keep up with the patriarchy, keep up with capitalism, productivity. Um, and we need to teach people to be okay with slowing down and honoring how much time they need for something. And I think walking slower, talking slower can help. And of course, I only do this selectively. I don't teach classes at this pace, but sometimes I do really consciously slow down and say, okay, maybe you're bored, but this is the pace I need. I'm not racing to keep up with your attention. If I lose your attention, that's okay. That's okay. You also have consent. You have autonomy and you can take your attention somewhere else. That's fine. But I'm not going to make myself like keep up with an anxiety provoking pace to keep your attention.
Wow. That is, I feel like that's revolutionary to be able to slow down so much, to be able to listen to you how you're feeling, because you're right, like I feel like we do push down our feelings and then, oh, like I'll just look at it later, so later, but to be able to actually do it in the moment, I think is so empowering. So just thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
um I wanted to get your opinions on AI. We were talking about like technology and how it is moving so fast. So, what do you think about it?
Um, I think there's contradiction in it. For one thing, it's here. So, like resisting it, fighting, railing against it doesn't feel useful. Like it is here. We're going to need to acknowledge that. I think, like any technology, it has the potential to catalyze human beings to do better and to do more. I think every technological revolution has freaked human beings out. When they invented the camera, painters who used to paint portraits were all like, oh no, we're going to be out of a job. But then it turns out freeing them to not have to paint, literal portraits allowed them to invent cubism and abstract surrealism and all these other, expressive techniques that maybe they wouldn't have if they'd been, documenting family portraits forever. So I think that technology often frees us to do higher work. And as a teacher, I'm in a lot of teaching communities and chat rooms and stuff. And a lot of teachers are like, it's terrible. And the kids are going to get dumb. And I'm like, no, only if we continue to teach the way we've been teaching. Yes, AI took over the method by which we were educating kids, which honestly needed to change. Learn these facts and reform them and regurgitate them back to me in a paper. It worked for a period of time. It's not a forward thinking education system. And so when people say, look, oh, they can just use AI, yeah, for that we need to invent a new way to teach that's going to bring people to higher levels of thinking. So I think it can absolutely catalyze us to better thinking, and some real evolution. That being said, it's got a lot of power. And anytime you've got a lot of power, you have to be careful because there are some very unreliable and cruel humans that we're living among. And, the same reason I want gun control is that a gun is a very powerful tool. And we need to be really careful that people are not using it for bad purposes. Now, for me, I feel like unless you're living in the wilderness, I could go no guns. But, you know, I feel I'm not going to get into Second Amendment stuff right now, but I feel like it absolutely needs to be really ethically considered, controlled, and made protected and cared for so that people don't use it to do bad things in the world. And I think it could do amazing things in the world. And we also need to figure out the ecology around it. Like, we cannot continue, it's not sustainable to have it take this much water, right? So we need to figure out how to make it ecologically sustainable because it is here and we can't have it destroy the planet. We're not putting it back in the bottle. So I think we need to get over the, like, we can't use it because it uses water. We have to figure out how it needs to not take so much processing power, or how we get, whatever. We have to figure that out. That needs to be a top priority. We need to figure out how to regulate it so that people that have bad intentions don't get to use such a powerful tool for harm. And we need to use it to challenge ourselves to do the work to evolve. And for me, when I'm hearing people, especially teachers, say, oh, AI this, AI that, I feel like you want to use all your old strategies. You don't want to have to like rethink all your teaching techniques. And I understand that it's a lot of work, but I think it's pretty exciting. And that's not everybody's strength. Not everybody is an inventor, right? There are plenty of teachers who are absolutely amazing teachers. They get along great with students. They really know how to see and listen and hear and help students, get better. But they're not necessarily like metacognitive specialists that are like, okay, let's zoom out and figure out, like, if AI is doing this, what strategies, that's not their strength. So every teacher, I think, does not need to invent this. The people that's their strong suit, who are really good at opening the aperture of their lens, zooming out to the big picture, using metacognition and saying, okay, systemically, AI has taken over this function. We want students to be able to get here, here, and there. What are the routes to get there? How could we use AI to help them get there, to help them get even smarter and be more critical thinkers than they are right now? And I think we're using some fairly lazy thinking right now. I think because we're scared of it. It's new. It's really understandable. I understand. I empathize with people who are scared of it and hate it and don't want it. But I think it is going to take us to some great places, but we have to step up to the challenge. It's going to be quite a bit of work. And I think if we can keep the planet safe, I think it's going to catalyze us to some pretty incredible new ways of thinking.
Couldn't say better myself. So thank you so much, Alexandra. It has been such a pleasure to have you on the show. My last little bit is about being a polymath. And so throughout our conversation, you have hit the four different disciplines. So obviously, arts, humanities, natural sciences, like with the anatomy of the body and the CMA, and then social sciences. So, do you have any last words as a polymath?
Oh, no, I mean, well, yes, I think I do. I think we, um, in general, as a species, are reductionists, and I think it's pretty scary to be in this unknown world with no reliable maps about the future. And I think it tends to make us condense, and we condense things into categories. And, that's how we get a gender binary, and that's how we get um, a lack of acceptance of holding contradiction in the body. Like I'm grieving and I'm also excited, or I feel freed, but I'm also really sad about this one thing, right? And we have a lot of trouble accepting contradiction. We have a lot of trouble holding more than one thing at the same time. But I think just the way AI is going to grow us, if we could take the lids off things and let them circulate and cross dissolve and cross fade and cross fertilize, we would be a lot happier and more authentic. So I don't see these things as very different from each other. Everything that happens in my body is going to change the way I relate to people. The way I relate to people is the way I'm going to take in ideas about the world and philosophy, which is going to change actions that I take and facts that I decide to believe or look up. So I feel like for me, it's very lemniscatic, which is like an infinity sign. And there really are not such strong boundaries between things.
Perfect. Yeah. So just thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this episode of ILA Radio, thank you for listening and for tuning into the many ways we come to know ourselves and the world. If something in this conversation sparked insight or reminded you of your own path, I invite you to keep exploring it, journal about it, talk to a friend, read a book, follow some social media accounts, or just notice what the universe is whispering next. I'd also love to hear what came up for you. I'd also love to hear what came up for you. Share your thoughts in the comments, tag me on social media, or send a message. Your story might spark someone else's learning too. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's questioning what learning could be. And remember, you don't have to choose between your intellect and your intuition. You were born to use both. And actually, there's 14 other ones that you were also born to use. And that actually goes for a lot of things. You don't have to choose one or the other. There's always a bunch of different options. So until next time, I'm Laura Alyn, and this is ILA Radio, where we tune into all ways of knowing. Thanks so much for being here. See you next week. Bye.